This interview is part of the SSCA Circumnavigators Summit, sharing experiences of members who circumnavigated. All engaged in this project are volunteers providing information solely for entertainment and education purposes. SSCA may edit and publish the interviews in the SSCA Circumnavigation Summit in audio and video formats to benefit its membership and as a recruiting tool. SSCA and participants assume no responsibility for the accuracy or validity of information shared in these interviews. Opinions stated do not necessarily reflect those of the Seven Sea Cruising Association.
Hello everybody, and welcome to the SSCA Circumnavigators Summit. My name is Jackie Lee from Catamaran Sloopmoosh, and I have the privilege to interview some of these special members who have completed a circumnavigation. Many volunteers at SSCA are working hard to make the organization new and fresh and relevant to our members. So we hope you will enjoy this new series. Many sailors wonder what it takes to make a circumnavigation and whether they could do it. We will be interviewing SSCA members who did it. Believe it or not, over 100 members sailed around the world just in between the period between 2001 and 2019. And bravo to them. You will have a chance to hear many varied types of sailors. Solo sailors, families, 2 to 3 year voyages, 20 plus years, international members, former SSCA board members, motor vessel owners, celebrities, and regular sailors just like us. So, without further ado, let's get right to the interview. Welcome everyone to the Seven Seas Circumnavigators Summit series. Our speakers today are going to be Ronald Bruce and Joanne Bush. Ronald came from the corporate world, and Joanne was a clinical social worker, and they got on the boat Miss Jody and went circumnavigating around the world, leaving their working life behind for a while. All right, it's wonderful to have them here. They are going to be a fun interview, and we'd like to welcome Ron and Joanne. Welcome.
Thank you very much. It's good to be here.
Thank you.
Without further ado, we'll go right into our interview. We want to know, what are your backgrounds and how did you get into sailing?
Well, for myself, sailing was delayed by several years in that I was a small town country boy, grew up in western Kentucky and went to school there. Graduated from the University of Kentucky, and then finally wound up in Florida in 1962, and I've been in Florida ever since. Was submerged in salt water and couldn't live without it. Got into sailing at about 1975 when I bought my first sailboat, and that activity was local bay sailing, and then became involved in racing, sailboat racing, raced all over the Gulf of Mexico from Key West to New Orleans. Did a lot of coastal cruising with different boats. And then finally in 1995, I quit working, moved aboard, and took off. And met Joanne in 2000 and conned her into joining me, and we've been together ever since.
And I had never been on a sailboat before I met Ron. I grew up on the Gulf Coast along Alabama and Florida Gulf Coast, and I was real used to boats, but not sailboats. So I was kind of in shock. The boat didn't go much faster than about 6 knots. And after 2 or 3 hours of sailing, I noticed he was in heaven and I was bored.
I like that. Yes. People that are new to sailing, they're always kind of very surprised when they find out that people are going around the world at about the speed that you can jog or ride a bike or sometimes only walking.
That's true.
Then you learned your sailing skills from Ron. Is that correct?
I did, yeah.
All right. Great. So then when you got the boat, Miss Jody, did you plan at that time to circumnavigate, or you did a little pre-cruising here and there first?
No, our circumnavigation took place literally one day at a time. When we met, I had a monohull at the time. It was a Morgan 43, and I persuaded Joanne to come with me, and we left from Pensacola and sailed around the Caribbean for 2 years on the monohull. And after we got back to Pensacola from that going around the Caribbean, Joanne made the observation that, if we had a catamaran like we met at so-and-so and so-and-so, I might be willing to do this some more. So we immediately started looking for a catamaran. And a few months later, we found one in the Bahamas and went down there and purchased it, brought it back to Pensacola, and worked on it for several months to get it ready for distance cruising and live aboard. And we left Pensacola with the intention of going back to the north side of Panama, that is the San Blas Island, which was our favorite place from having made the circumnavigation of the Caribbean. We had no intention of going into the Pacific at that time.
All right. So you got a catamaran. And I think, Joanne, you made a good decision. We're multi-hullers. We're multi-hullers ourselves. What model catamaran was it, and was there a particular reason you chose it?
Well, the catamaran that we purchased was a PDQ 42 foot, and it was their hull number 2. So PDQ had just started making the 42 foot. And that was the boat that we purchased. We looked at several other catamarans prior to deciding on the purchase of this one. We looked at the Katana, we looked at Lagoon, we looked at several catamarans, and for one reason or another, we evolved into liking the PDQ. And again, we had never sailed a catamaran before, so we didn't really know much about the sailing characteristics of one versus the other than what we could read and learn by research looking at different write-ups. The Katana was a very strong draw because it had a reputation of being the fastest of all the catamarans. But the PDQ was a very, very high quality constructed vessel. The PDQ, after a couple of years, later became known as the Antares, that the PDQ was actually, the 42 was designed by a couple of young men from North Carolina. Even though the boat was made in Canada, they purchased the molds from PDQ and started their own manufacturing in the United States with the Antares. And then the Antares later moved to South America long after that. And I think that's where they still are today. But anyway, the PDQ was a very high quality boat, and we really, really enjoyed it. It was I can speak more about learning how to sail a catamaran after having spent 30 years sailing monohulls. But that was the boat that we chose.
That's good to know. Yes, I remember the PDQ and was curious because we heard about it for a while and then didn't hear it, so you solved some of the mystery there. So what year do you consider that you started your circumnavigation, and from where?
Well, we left Pensacola. We actually attempted to leave. We got the boat back to Pensacola, and Ron started working on it, and we actually left in 2004, got as far as Honduras and had generator problems that would not quit. So he just said, I'm going back home and fix this thing. So we came all the way back to Pensacola. He worked with Fisher Panda, and they were very helpful and got it running, and actually gave us a new, the generator end of the generator. And so then Ivan came, which was that terrible hurricane in 2004.
Oh,
and
yeah.
we were one of the few boats to survive in Pensacola. There were no marinas left, and I'd say 98% of the boats were destroyed.
Oh, wow.
We had a hole knocked in. Yeah, it was bad. We had a hole knocked in the boat, but it was above the water line, and we were able to get it fixed. So anyway, we were sick and tired of running from hurricanes, and so we decided then, once we got the hole fixed in the boat, okay, we're taking off. We're just going to get out of here. So we left in 2005 with the intention of going straight to Sandblast Islands, and which we kind of did. We went to Isla Mujeres, and then we stopped at Swan Island, which is part of Nicaragua, that we'd never seen before because it's not really a boat-friendly place. And then we went on up to Panama, and we spent a whole year in San Blas, and then Colón, and Boca del Toro, and just kind of spending a lot more time in Panama. And then because we had so much feedback from all of the boaters there about going through the canal, we said, well, we'll just go through the canal. Actually, we did line handling for 2 different boats. And then we thought, well, we'll just take Miss Jody through the canal. That'll be a fun adventure. So that's kind of how we stuck our nose out there, still really not intending to go much further, even though Ron kept saying, well, we can go to the Galapagos, and then we can turn around and come back. So he was real good at dangling that carrot.
Just a little bit further. Little step by step. See, you made it this far. Maybe we could go a little bit further, Well, that's true. You could go down to Galapagos, and then you go out to Hawaii, and then you come back again, right? Okay. Very good, Ron.
Yep, that's what I needed.
Okay, so then, in your just sort of casual kind of calculations, how many years did you consider that it took you to do your circumnavigation?
Well, as a matter of fact, I have a plaque on the wall that says that we spent 7 years, 4 months, 18 days, and 3 hours doing the circumnavigation.
Not very precise, are we? And I'm sure that's on your SSCA Circumnavigators Award. All right, and speaking of SSCA, how did you hear about SSCA, and why did you decide to join, and when?
I actually do not know when I joined. It was in the 80s when I joined, before I actually bailed out of society and moved aboard and took off. But I had heard about SSCA from some source, and I joined, and I went to a couple of GAMs in South Florida, and became an avid fan of SSCA, reading every bulletin that they published, And as a matter of fact, this morning I dug up some of the old bulletins that I have that go back to 2009, and I found a couple of the articles that the two of you wrote for the SSCA.
Okay.
I never wrote an article for the SSCA for some reason, but I never did. But I still have multiple old bulletins that were my favorite pastime of reading and being educated of different people's experience in different places. So it was SSCA was a great resource for me from before the time I left to do long distance cruising until this day.
Wonderful stories that you got to go to some GAMs and meet some SSCAers and get an idea of what we're all about. And I'm glad that you did and that you're still with us here talking today. Also, do you have any other kind of fun story about SSCA or an SSCAer or something involved with SSCA that you'd like to share with us?
Well, I don't, not really a fun story, but I just know that each month when we were here in between times on the boat, we would get so excited when bulletin came and, both pore over it and highlight, and especially excited when we recognized somebody that we'd met that was writing something. It was really a great resource. And then later, when communication got a little bit easier, we'd go online and just type in a destination on SSCA and find all kinds of interesting information. So it was really, really helpful. And of course, we'd fly Ron was a Commodore, and we'd fly the flag, and that would always start conversations in different anchorages from other people that had the same flag. So it was kind of a special camaraderie.
Okay, yes, great. Okay, and good on you, Ron, for flying your flag, because it seemed once we got out of the Caribbean and into the Pacific, and that there were fewer and fewer SSCAers that were proudly flying the swallowtail, and so we missed some people, and we missed meeting them, and probably those flags got pretty worn out. Let's go to a different subject. Weather. How did you manage to get weather reports and those kinds of things, and were you able to avoid bad weather, and how did your weather communications gathering, how did it evolve over the years that you were circumnavigating?
Well, it did in fact evolve. Before we actually started the circumnavigation, I became a ham radio operator.
Okay.
And had single sideband radio on boats prior to Miss Jody. And through that habit of checking in with the net every morning and hearing somebody relay weather forecasting, weather became the principal topic of conversation every day. No matter where in the world you were, weather was always the topic of conversation. And with the passing of time and the evolution of the communication systems, with the single sideband radio, initially was airmail and sail mail, WinLink. The communication grew easier after the induction of satellite phones. It made the connection with the internet world much, much easier. But we gradually well, first of all, we used pilot charts diligently on a continuing basis. It was a long time before I gave up the notion that paper charts and dead reckoning and celestial navigation was the way to navigate. It took me a long time to give that up. Even after GPS and chart plotters and everything became common practice for many people, I still hung on to the paper.
Mm-hmm.
And so anyway, the pilot charts were the primary way to learn what the weather pattern was going to be in different parts of the world at different times of the year, and what the probability of different wind strengths and wind direction was. And consequently, we stayed in parts of the world where the wind was projected to be calm. That is, we didn't go into the North Atlantic during hurricane season, and then we didn't go into the South Pacific during cyclone season, and we didn't go into the Indian Ocean during their storm season. But we learned to use grid files, and we learned to gather weather information and make our own judgment. And one of the side observations I would make to anybody that's getting ready to leave shore is to gain confidence in your own ability to make judgments about the weather and sea condition, and follow your own judgment as opposed to following the gossip information that is so prevalent no matter where you are. Following your own judgment and knowing the ability of your boat and your crew is by far the most valuable thing you can grab a hold of. So anyway, that's how we got accustomed to weather and weather monitoring.
When you were on Miss Jody anywhere on your voyage, did you run into some lively sailing, as the British would say?
Yes, we did, and I'll let Joanne tell you about that.
Okay.
That's because whenever we would get into a lively situation, I like how you put that. I never really thought of it as lively. I always thought of it as deadly. We definitely have a different outlook on life. He would always tell me it wasn't life-threatening after we'd go through a scary situation, and I'd think, he's crazy. It was definitely life-threatening, but anyway, we were real lucky. He was real good about what he just talked about, watching the weather and planning. But we did have one situation going from the Andaman Islands to Sri Lanka. That was about 1,000 miles. It should have taken us about 6 days, and the weather was forecast to be okay, and we eventually left. And about the second day out, we got in a unforecasted low pressure system that didn't show up on any of the weather data. And we even we had met some young men that owned a dive shop in Sri Lanka. We'd met them in Malaysia, and we called them on the sat phone. And we didn't use that phone. We didn't call people very often. We used it mostly for emails, but we called them because we were very concerned about where was this coming from and which direction should we go to get out of it, and how long is it going to be around, because it was, it was very uncomfortable. It was about 30, 35 knots on the nose, and of course in the Catamaran you don't go anywhere on the nose, and it lasted for 3 days, and by the time we were through it, we had 45 knots, and we had 20-foot sea. And we'd laugh at people giving sea heights because it always seems to be exaggerated, but it was quite frightening, and we basically had to we lay a hull one time for a while, and then we just tried to make a little more way, and then we hove to, and we spent 2 days just actually going with the current. We lost a lot of our distance that we had made because it was blowing us backwards, but we couldn't do anything. And the friends that we had called told us that the storm would be gone by midnight. This was the first night we called them. And of course it wasn't. It was 3 full days. We listened to a boat being abandoned, another sailboat that was out there, taken on water, and we listened to, for about an hour, different commercial vessels talking to this sailboat, trying to figure out how to get those people off the boat. And so it was very scary. But even though I know we were in danger, we were very careful and very lucky and very appreciative that the boat took such good care of us. And I've never been so happy to see land as when we got to Sri Lanka.
Okay, what a story. Yeah, that's the kind of things that can happen, unforecasted storms, and that was a long one, 3 days, my gosh. I guess Ron guided you through with your first lying a hull and then heaving to, and it's discouraging to seeing yourself go backwards, but at least the boat is doing okay and didn't get a hole and no abandoning ship or that sort of thing. So actually, when you look back at it, yeah, Ron says we weren't in danger, but it doesn't seem like that when you're in the midst of it. Okay, wow, what a story. Any other comments, Ron?
Well, other than that's probably the best example that we can offer as to the stability and safety of a catamaran in ugly weather. The boat, I was able to get the boat to heave to, even though it's got a 3.5 foot draft and no centerboard. And we lay about 45 degrees off the wind, but the wind did push us backwards. It pushed us to lee, probably at the speed of a half a knot or so. So we didn't heave to quite as efficiently as a monohull would, but we did heave to well enough that we were both able to lay down and rest without worrying about what was going to happen to the boat. The boat took care of itself and took care of us.
Okay, yes, that's the most important part, is that you don't get frazzled out or somehow get hurt, so you were able to stabilize the boat a little and get rest. Yeah, and even though, let's see, it takes a few more days, at least you were able to do it. All right. And communications, you told us a lot about communications as far as you had the ham radio license and SSB radio nets, and then later on Sail Mail and WinLink. Was there, okay, and then later you got a sat phone, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. But we, as Joanne said, we used the sat phone primarily as a connection device to the internet, as opposed to using the voicemail. I was too tight to spend the money to use it for voicemail.
Right, yeah, it's pretty expensive, that sat phone. And I think a lot of people use the sat phone to get, you can get weather bulletins more quickly and more reliably. Is that true?
Yes, that's correct. Yes.
Okay. So, do you like the idea of having both the SSB radio and SATCOM for like emergencies?
Yes, it was after the satellite radio came in, it made communication much easier because using the single sideband radio, as Joanne would say, I would spend at least an hour, sometimes 2 hours every evening just trying to get connected so that we could make communication. And then after the satellite phone came into being, the need to do that went away. So it made things much simpler, much easier. But the single sideband radio was still a valuable device to use for voice communication.
One cruiser that we talked to said that sail mail, WinLink, and those kinds of things worked fine until the Indian Ocean. And then in the Indian Ocean it seemed to be quite difficult to get stations and that sort of thing. Did you find that?
Yes, Joanne pointed out to me last night when we were talking about this that we did in fact engage in a voice weather service at some point out there, and I had forgotten about that. And I'm sure it was because we were having difficulty with being able to connect with WinLink and sail mail.
Right, and I'm sure after that storm, yeah, that could have been another factor to prod you on to getting voice weather. Was it like a weather advisor, a router? What kind of thing was that?
It was a weather advisor. It was a voice weather advisor. It was a person as opposed to a weather service.
Okay. All right. Now, people always wonder about piracy and burglary and that sort of thing. Did you have different strategies that you came up with to deal with those sort of things, and did you have any kind of piracy or security issues?
Yes, we had piracy and security issues multiple times.
Oh.
We talked about this yesterday evening, and Joanne reminded me of multiple incidences that I had forgotten. So I'll let her, if she would, share with you what she shared with me last night when I'd forgotten all of it.
Well, we really, most of the problems that we had were in the Caribbean. But, we spent so much time in the Caribbean, it's not fair to say that, because we heard people in the Med say, you don't want to go to the Caribbean, it's too dangerous. We had lots of incidents where we had small boats approach us, and we would see the boat, and it would have 2 or 3 young men in it, usually. And, of course, you can't help but feel apprehensive. And for the most part, when they got close enough to us, all they wanted was a beer or cigarettes or gasoline. Usually they would have fish to trade. We debated when we left Pensacola, we did not have a weapon on the boat, and we had debated because neither one of us were comfortable with that. We knew that if we had a weapon, we would have to shoot somebody before we would be able to have them explain what they wanted. So we just chose to trust in human nature, and as it turned out, we were very, always pleasantly surprised once the encounter was over, but apprehensive in the beginning. We had, off of Nicaragua, we had a large cigarette boat. We were about 50 miles offshore, and it approached us from we don't know where with 3 young gentlemen in it. And Ron did tell me to go below. That was unusual because it was so far off the coast, and it was a big power boat that used a lot of fuel. And they did approach him, and they just told him he had a pretty boat, and they wanted to know where he was going. And I just stayed below. That was the only time I'd actually felt like I was hiding, but I was. We had different incidents where times when, like in Belize, someone attempted to steal our dinghy, but we had it attached to the boat, so they dropped it down out of the lift, but it was attached, so they couldn't get it. And of course, the pirate situation out of Somalia was completely different. That was a definite scary time, but for the most part, when people would approach us, we would just do our best to stay calm and be friendly, and we were very lucky. We didn't have we had one or two things stolen off the boat when we were in an anchorage, but nothing real serious.
Okay, so the approaches that you got from the people, the general outcome was that it was not really pirates or people with ill intentions wanting to hurt you, but as you can never tell when boats approach you, and sadly that we have to be so apprehensive, but you just don't know these days. There was when we were around Venezuela, there was an incident where a really nice looking couple came up with them in a speedboat and said, "Oh, we're going to have a beach barbecue and we forgot to bring our matches, so do you have any kind of lighter or something like that?" And when the people went below to go get something, suddenly the people from that boat were behind them, and so you just never know. But we're very glad that the incidences turned out all right for you. And so with the cigarette boat in Nicaragua, they just were making conversation and then they zoomed off?
Yeah, we assumed they were maybe a drug running boat or something. Yeah, they just talked for about 5 minutes and then they said, "Adios," and they took off.
Okay. Guess they decided you weren't the kind of boat that they wanted to steal or hurt. All right. Okay.
Well, let me add a little bit to that.
Okay.
At one point in the midst of the Caribbean, we became so concerned with security that we purchased a shotgun in Pensacola and had it shipped on the airplane with us. We took it apart and put it into various pieces in our luggage and brought it with us back to Venezuela on an airplane. We actually cleared it through customs in Venezuela. The customs people in Venezuela didn't even look at it. We acknowledged that we had it, even though it was in pieces. We still acknowledged that we had it, and they didn't even look at it. So we had that shotgun on the boat, but was that the initial? That's when we were on the Footloose, wasn't it?
Well, we had the shotgun. When we were on Footloose and we were in Venezuela, we left the boat there and came home for a month, and that's when the coup happened. That was, I guess that was about 2002 or 3, I guess maybe. And we left the boat, and so we got home and we were telling friends about it. Everybody was like, "You got to get a gun, you got to get a gun." So we went to Walmart and bought a gun and took it out and shot it a few times, and then took it back to Venezuela. And luckily, there were no problems as far as getting back to the boat and getting on the boat and getting out of Venezuela, because we were, everybody was encouraging us to leave. So we did. We did have that gun on the boat when that big cigarette boat approached us. It was hidden on the boat, but Ron told me to go down and get it and not to come up unless he called me. So we knew we had the gun, but we probably would have shot ourselves in the foot. But and then we did transfer that gun over to Miss Jody, and we took it with us on half of our circumnavigation, not even half. We took it as far as New Zealand, and each country you go in, you have to claim what you have, and then you have to surrender it, and then you have to get it back when you're ready to leave that country. So we just decided we're going to tell them they can keep that gun in New Zealand, because we knew, we didn't want to hassle with it, and we knew we wouldn't be able to use it. So anyway.
That's a good and interesting story, because having firearms on board is a very controversial subject between cruisers. And I think without making any kind of editorial statements on whether it's wise or unwise, I think everyone has to decide their own feelings about it. And it's good to hear your story and what evolved, and not say anything more than that. So let's go on to the next question. How did you sustain yourself financially during your voyage?
Well, we had good fortune. When I decided to leave corporate America, I sold my house, sold my home, moved aboard the boat Footloose that I had at the time, and my oldest son had just left the engineering world and had decided to become a money manager, a financial manager. So I gave him what money I had, and he learned how to manage it, and kept us afloat during the entire trip.
All right. Lucky you had your own financial manager.
Yeah.
That's great. With hindsight, is there anything that you would have done differently?
From my point of view, no, other than I wish we were still out there. We came back to Pensacola, and the last year that we were out there, I had some pretty serious health issues. And then after we got back to Pensacola, it took about a year and a half to get all those issues squared away. But I wish we were still out there, and I am envious of the two of you.
All right. And what about Joanne? What's your point of view?
Oh, well, I wish I had been able to relax and enjoy it more. I was real good at doing that when we were at anchor, and I could enjoy the beautiful water. I love to dive, and I love to collect shells and fish, and I just enjoyed that environment. I did not enjoy the passages, and I wish I could have learned to do that more readily. I tried hypnosis. I did a lot of meditating on the boat. Lots of prayer when I was really, really stressed. But I tend to look at what could happen instead of what was happening. So I wish I could have stayed in the present and just enjoyed each day a little better than I did.
Okay. Yeah, that's a very common story between men and women. Women are always, I guess because of our evolution and the tendency that we need safety when we're raising a family or taking care of children and that sort of thing. And so we're always aware of what might happen. And yes, I can understand that. And that I think you were wise in the end, realizing that you didn't enjoy and you couldn't relax. And so for those last passages, it was better that you weren't on the boat and that Ron took the boat and then you met him in different places. So I think that's we all have to come up with our own situation and what we feel comfortable with. And we still consider you a circumnavigator, Joanne.
Thank you. Me too. It was a long trip.
Okay. All right. So after your circumnavigation, what did you do then? Did you sail a little bit more? Stop? What happened after the official circumnavigation?
Well, after the circumnavigation was over and we got the boat back to Pensacola, I had some health issues that had to be taken care of. I had 2 knees that needed to be replaced, and I had a heart attack. And
Oof.
so about a year and a half of just sitting on our butt with me getting myself cured. And then we decided to make one more trip to the Bahamas. So we took Miss Jody and sailed to the Bahamas from Pensacola for a few months and came back to Pensacola and then decided to go ahead and sell the boat, sell the Catamaran. And we did, and we sold it to some good friends who actually have the boat still in Pensacola. The boat is moored right now at Pensacola Yacht Club, where we go to on a regular basis. And unfortunately, we see the boat there, still labeled Miss Jody, still sitting there. And then after we sold Jody, we were boatless for a few months, and then we decided to try a power boat. So we bought a trawler and kept it for about a year. And the trawler was just too big for me to work on. Everything on it was too big, just too big. So anyway, we wound up selling the trawler, and now we have 3 kayaks.
Okay.
A trimaran.
Right, as Luke said, it's a trimaran. Kayak marans. Okay. Well, that's good. Well, we do what, that's good. So you still have some water fun anyway. Is there any other subject that you would like to talk about before we wrap up?
Well, I'd like to just kind of talk about the situation crossing the Indian Ocean, because people always ask about it. From the time we probably got to Malaysia, we were talking about going through the Indian Ocean and the Red Sea, and just about every topic of conversation was how are you going to go through that part of the world safely, because the pirate activity had increased so much. So for 2 years, I was dreading the thought of going around, going up to the Red Sea.
Mm-hmm.
And, everybody's got an opinion. Everybody's got a different way of thinking is the best way to do it. We listened to, I can't remember the name of the boat, but the first scam we went to in Melbourne or Miami, we heard somebody talk about his encounter with the pirates and how he was involved in a shootout with these pirates. And so this was in the back of my mind, that whole half of the trip. And when we got to the Maldives, we were told that the attempted hijackings had increased by 300%.
Mm.
And that the U.S. government and the British government, all the different governments that were involved in that coalition, were strongly telling private boats, do not go through that area. And there were probably, when we arrived in the Maldives, there were probably 10 or 12 boats sitting there. And the very first day we got there, they had a meeting planned on shore to talk about the situation. So we went to the meeting and heard, how dire it had become. And people were either deciding to turn around and go back to Singapore. Some people were putting their boats on ships. That wasn't an option for us initially, but we ended up, by the time Ron left, there were several people we knew that did put their boat on a ship and take it to the Med. It was such a beautiful place to be, and yet such an anxious, worrisome time. Ron said, well, we'll go around, anyway, we came up with a million different plans, and eventually we woke up one morning and he said, I want you to get off the boat, which I felt terribly guilty leaving him, but I knew that emotionally I couldn't handle what was going to come, even just the worry of boats approaching us, and even if nothing really happened. And so he didn't have to twist my arm too hard to talk me into flying back to Pensacola. So luckily in Sri Lanka, we had a young man fly in from England to meet us. We advertised on Cruise Seekers for a crew to go through the Red Sea from Sri Lanka. We had actually requested it from Thailand, and we didn't have any takers. So he came to Sri Lanka and met us, and we just hit it off with him. He was just a precious, adventurous, young, he was 40-something, and just very outgoing, and he just wanted the experience of being on a boat. So we know that was a God thing, that God put him on our boat, because that allowed me then, when we got to the Maldives, to know that Ron would be okay. He wouldn't be by himself. So I left them. I had to, I ended up flying to Dubai and then to Pensacola, and he ended up taking the boat with Jules, this young man that helped us. And he will tell you that nothing happened, but he had lots of opportunities for there to be problems. They always turned out to be okay, but he was in constant communication with the Navy and with the sat phone, and they would send a plane out to, or a helicopter out to circle over him to see who he was encountering. And so anyway, I don't want to, he needs to tell you that story, but it was a very, very anxious time. The 4 people that were on the sailboat that were killed were about 4 days ahead of you? Behind you. So, there was real danger out there. So I felt very blessed to be off the boat, even though I felt like I'd left, I left a part of me there, which I did. But anyway, I'll let Ron tell you if he has something to add to that.
Okay.
Well, that's a pretty good description of what the circumstance was, and we eventually made the passage from the Maldives to the entrance to the Red Sea. We left in the presence. We decided to leave in the presence, or in the company, of 3 other boats. One of the boats was a catamaran that we had met in Tonga, and we had sailed with them off and on over the following years, and we both rendezvoused in the Maldives at the same time. So we knew them very well. We were good friends with them. I had a lot of confidence in them. And then there were 2 other boats that were there. Another boat was a PDQ catamaran, and the other one was a monohull, and they were both Europeans. And we became acquaintances with them while we were there at the anchorage in Maldives. And I was a person that did not like to sail with groups. I was not a buddy boater per se. I had lots of good friends, and my preference was we can leave port at the same time, but I'm not going to sail beside you. I don't want the responsibility of sailing along beside you to take care of you. I trust my boat. I trust myself. That's what I want to do when I'm offshore. So I was reluctant to join with a group, and as a matter of fact, there were about 15 boats that decided to leave as a group, and sail across the Indian Ocean toward the Red Sea. And I didn't want any part of that. But we did agree to sail with these 3 other boats, and we agreed upon sailing with them in a formation with no communication, no lights on, but to sail within eye distance of each other with the intention that if we were intercepted, we would not attempt to rescue each other, but would attempt to run from the bad guys and communicate with the military to get help. And anyway, after about 2 days of trying to sail with these 3 other boats, we couldn't agree upon how to stay in formation, how to communicate, how to conduct ourselves. So Miss Jody, with Jules on board, and the other catamaran who were good friends of ours, we chose the 2 of us to sail together up into the Red Sea. And so we departed the other 2 boats, and the 2 of us sailed up into the Red Sea. And we sailed with the agreement that if the bad guys come, you are not to come and try to help me, and I'm not going to try to come and help you. But instead, I'm going to run, and you're going to run, and as a part of our obligation to each other, we're going to do everything we can to communicate with the authorities to get help. But you don't have a machine gun on board, and I don't have a machine gun on board. So if the bad guys come, we're not each other. So anyway, that was our agreement, and that was what we intended to do. But fortunately, the only thing we had to deal with was some sightings off in the distance that went away, and then we finally made landfall in Yemen, and made our way on up into the Red Sea without really having any incidences other than distant observations. So anyway, that's a lengthy tale to tell. But.
Right, but very, very tense, very interesting to know about, and it is the kind of situation that some boats get into, and so everyone who is listening, now they have a feeling for your experience and what kinds of things you did, and I think the idea that you are not going to go back and try to fight off pirates was a good decision, and I think that was something that you chose well. And to sail with another boat, which luckily was the same kind of boat as yours, so then you had a better time being able to stay together. All right, wow, phew, I'm all tense. Anyway, you survived. You survived. Congratulations to you. That makes your circumnavigation even that much more valuable. And as maybe a more optimistic thing. Do you have any kind of parting words of wisdom that you would like to share with our audience?
Well, I think from my point of view, I've had 3 careers in my life, and the most rewarding one was the way of life of living aboard and cruising to different parts of the world. That was not a trip. That was a way of life. And it's a way of life that I will forever be grateful for having had the opportunity to do. And the people that we met in different places around the world, the local people that we met, were the real reward of the trip. The sights were beautiful, but the people that we interacted with in every part of the world were so incredible that it's amazing that our governments can't get along with each other, yet the people that live in every country that we went to were so incredibly polite and helpful and kind to us that you just walk away in disbelief at how wonderful the people are.
Yes, that's true. And Joanne, do you have any other words to add?
Well, I agree with Ron. It was our experiences with the local people that meant so much to us. We've made lifelong friends that we're still in touch with in many places. One little encounter comes to mind. Now, I'm not still in touch with this person because we really couldn't communicate very well, but when we arrived in Fatahiva in the Marquesas, we went ashore, and of course those people are so incredibly welcoming and loving, and we hit it off with this one lady, and she gave us all kinds of fruits and vegetables from her yard, and one of the things she gave us was a big stock of mangoes. And I went back to the boat and I made mango bread that another friend of mine that lived on a boat gave me the recipe for. And I eventually took her some of that mango bread and invited her to come back to the boat. And we brought her in the dinghy and we came back and we sat and we had that mango bread and coffee, and we couldn't speak a word of each other's language. But it was just such a treat she gave me the mangoes and I made her the bread, and then we got to share it, and I wrote the recipe down for her. I have no idea if she was ever able to, get that translated, but the joy that it gave us to see her, it was just a very special memory. And we had lots of those. That was just one that really stuck out in my mind.
Okay, that is wonderful. That's a great way to end, is with the positive things about people that you meet along the way. The fact that most people of the world are so wonderful, loving, giving, and it just warms your heart and makes you want to give back so much more. So we thank you so much for this interview. It's been fascinating, and we've had the ups and we've had the downs and we've had all kinds of things, and we just really appreciate your taking the time to do this with us and sending those beautiful pictures you did and some wonderful underwater photography, which we'll be playing during this interview. So thank you so much again, Ron and Joanne. Thank you, and we had such a great time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. It was very gracious of you. And Luke, I can't get over how giving the two of you are to be doing this. It's just overwhelming. And we're very grateful for the opportunity to participate.
If you enjoy this interview, make sure to listen to our other guests in the series, subscribe to SSCA YouTube channel, access the MP3 audio recording on SSCA website. Get the scoop on the latest SSCA activities and benefits, read the latest cruiser bulletin, participate in the forum and Facebook group, and please promote our organization to who you think might benefit.